Margaret, why don't you show everyone your green thumb? The hedges out back could use some attention, my son's future father-in-law announced at the engagement party, and the entire room erupted in laughter. 50 guests, champagne glasses raised, all witnessing what Richard Bennett considered a harmless joke. I stood there in my navy dress, the one I'd bought specifically for this occasion, and felt the familiar sting of being reduced to nothing more than the dirt under someone's fingernails. My name is Margaret Chen, though most people call me Maggie. I'm 62 years old, and I've spent the last 35 years working with my hands. Not in the way Richard Bennett imagined when he made his little quip, but I'll get to that. First, let me take you back to how we ended up in that sprawling Connecticut mansion, surrounded by people who measured worth in yacht club memberships and summer homes in the Hamptons. My son David is 29 now, a software engineer with a good head on his shoulders and a heart that's perhaps too forgiving. He met Sophie Bennett 2 years ago through one of those dating apps. She was a corporate lawyer at her father's firm, brilliant and beautiful, with the kind of pedigree that comes from generations of old money. When David first told me about her, I heard the nervousness in his voice, the subtle hesitation when he mentioned her family's background. "Mom," he'd said over our weekly Sunday dinner at my small but comfortable home in Toronto, "I need to tell you something about Sophie." I'd looked up from the roasted chicken I was carving. "She's not married, is she?" He laughed, though it sounded forced. "No, nothing like that. It's just, her family is very different from us. They're quite wealthy. Old money, you know?" I set down the carving knife and took his hand. "David, I raised you to judge people by their character, not their bank balance. Does she make you happy?" "She does, Mom. She really does." "Then that's all that matters." But I'd seen the warning signs even then. In the 2 years they'd been together, I'd met Sophie exactly 3 times, and each meeting felt choreographed, brief, as if she were checking off a box on some invisible list. There was always an excuse, a work emergency, a family commitment, a headache. David made excuses for her, and I let him because I wanted him to be happy. I wanted to believe that love could bridge any gap. The engagement announcement came last spring. David called me on a Tuesday evening, his voice bright with excitement. "Mom, I asked Sophie to marry me, and she said yes." I'd screamed with joy, genuinely thrilled for my son. "Oh, David, congratulations, sweetheart. Tell me everything. When did you propose? Where?" He described the romantic scene, a sunset proposal on a beach in Prince Edward Island, the ring he'd been saving for months to buy. As he spoke, I noticed something he didn't mention. Any reaction from Sophie's family. "What did her parents say?" I asked carefully. A pause. "We're telling them this weekend. There's going to be a party, Mom. They want to throw us an engagement party. It's going to be at their estate in Connecticut. You'll come, won't you?" "Of course I'll come. I wouldn't miss it for the world." "There's just one thing," David said, and I heard that hesitation again. "It's going to be pretty formal. Black tie. Sophie's parents know a lot of people, so there'll probably be around 50 or 60 guests." "I can handle formal, David. I may work with dirt, but I clean up nicely." He laughed, but it sounded relieved. "I know, Mom. I want everything to go well." That should have been my first clue. The party was scheduled for a Saturday in late October. I took the train down from Toronto on Friday, staying at a modest hotel about 20 minutes from the Bennett estate. David had offered to pay for somewhere nicer, but I'd refused. I've never been comfortable with anyone spending money on me, not even my son. Saturday afternoon, I stood in my hotel room, looking at myself in the full-length mirror. The navy dress was simple but elegant, hitting just below my knees. I'd had my hair done that morning, my silver-gray hair styled in soft waves. I wore the pearl earrings my late husband Thomas had given me on our 20th anniversary, and a simple pearl necklace to match. I thought, respectable, dignified, like someone's mother should look at her son's engagement party. If I'd known what was coming, I might have worn armor instead. The Bennett estate was exactly what you'd expect from old Connecticut money, a sprawling Georgian mansion with manicured lawns that rolled down to a private pond, ancient oak trees lining the circular driveway, and a fountain in the center that probably cost more than my house. As the car service David had arranged pulled up, I saw guests arriving in luxury vehicles, the men in crisp tuxedos, the women in designer gowns that cost more than I made in a month. I took a deep breath, clutched my small purse, and stepped out. David was waiting at the entrance, looking handsome in his tuxedo. When he saw me, his face lit up. "Mom, you look beautiful." He hugged me tight, and for a moment, everything felt right. "Come on," he said, linking his arm through mine. "Let me introduce you to everyone." The interior of the house was even more impressive than the outside marble floors, crystal chandeliers, artwork that I suspected was original and worth more than most people's retirement funds. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres that looked almost too beautiful to eat. Sophie appeared almost immediately, gliding over in a white cocktail dress that probably cost $5,000. She kissed David's cheek, then turned to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mrs. Chen, how lovely to see you again." She didn't hug me, didn't even offer her hand, just that cool smile. "Please, call me Maggie. And congratulations, dear. I'm so happy for you both." "Thank you." She glanced around the room. "I should introduce you to my parents. They're so excited to finally meet you properly." That word finally hung in the air like a challenge. Richard Bennett was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of posture that came from generations of people telling him he was important. His wife, Catherine, was rake-thin in a champagne-colored gown, her blonde hair pulled back so tightly it must have given her a headache. They were holding court near the fireplace, surrounded by what I assumed were fellow members of their social circle. "Mother, father," Sophie said, her voice taking on a different quality, sharper, more refined. "This is David's mother, Margaret Chen." Richard turned, and I saw his eyes do a quick scan, assessing, categorizing, dismissing. He extended his hand for a perfunctory shake. "Mrs. Chen, welcome to our home." His hand was cool, the grip deliberately brief. "Thank you for having me. You have a beautiful home." "Yes, well, it's been in the family for 4 generations." Catherine's smile was as thin as her frame. "Sophie tells us you live in Toronto?" "Yes, that's right. Born and raised." "How quaint. And what do you do, exactly?" I felt David tense beside me. This was the moment I'd been dreading, though I wasn't entirely sure why. "I'm in landscaping," I said simply. Richard's eyebrows rose slightly. "Landscaping? I see. So you're a gardener?" "I work in the industry, yes." Catherine's tinkling laugh cut through the air. "Oh, how wonderful. You know, Richard, we've been looking for someone to redo the East Garden. Perhaps Mrs. Chen could recommend someone from her circle." I felt the condescension like a slap, but I kept my smile fixed. "I'm sure you have excellent landscapers already." "Oh, we do, but one can never have too many options." Catherine turned to Sophie. "Darling, we should get Mrs. Chen's card. You never know when we might need some hedges trimmed." The conversation continued for a few more excruciating minutes before Sophie steered her parents away to greet other guests. David squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry, Mom. They can be a bit snobbish?" I offered. I was going to say traditional, but yeah, that too. "It's fine, sweetheart. I've dealt with worse." And I had. 35 years in business teaches you to develop thick skin. But this wasn't just business. This was my son's future family. And the casual cruelty in Catherine's voice when she talked about hedges had made it clear what they thought of me. The evening progressed. David introduced me to various guests, his colleagues from work, some of Sophie's law school friends, various Bennett family members who all seemed to have been stamped from the same mold of polite condescension. I smiled, made small talk, and counted the minutes until I could reasonably leave. Then came dinner. The dining room could have seated 30 comfortably, and tonight it did. I found myself seated near the far end of the table, wedged between an elderly aunt who was mostly deaf and a young man who spent the entire meal texting under the table. David and Sophie were at the head of the table with Richard and Catherine, too far away for conversation. The food was exquisite, multiple courses, each more elaborate than the last. The wine flowed freely. As dessert was being served, Richard stood up, tapping his crystal glass with a silver spoon. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining Catherine and me tonight to celebrate the engagement of our darling Sophie to young David. He paused for the polite applause. We couldn't be more thrilled to welcome David into the Bennett family. He's a bright young man with a promising future in technology. I noticed he didn't mention me. Didn't mention David's family at all. Now, I know some of you are curious about David's background, Richard continued, and my stomach dropped. He's a self-made man, really. Worked his way through university, built his career through sheer determination. Quite admirable, especially considering he didn't have the advantages many of us grew up with. The implication was clear, and I saw several guests glance in my direction. In fact, Richard said, warming to his theme, David's mother Margaret is here tonight. Stand up, Margaret. Let everyone see you. My face burning, I slowly rose from my seat. Margaret works in landscaping, Richard announced, as if he were presenting a curiosity at a museum. She spent her life working with her hands, providing an honest living for her son. We should all admire such dedication to hard work. The applause that followed was sprinkled with barely concealed amusement. I could see it in their faces, these people, who'd never worked a day of manual labor in their lives, who thought hard work meant a difficult merger or a challenging golf game. In fact, Richard continued, and I just knew something awful was coming. Margaret, why don't you show everyone your green thumb? The hedges out back could use some attention. Catherine's been complaining about them for weeks. The room erupted in laughter, genuine, unrestrained laughter, as if Richard had told the funniest joke they'd ever heard. Catherine was practically doubled over, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. Sophie's face had gone pale, but she wasn't laughing, she was frozen, her eyes darting between her father and David. David had stood up, his face flushed with anger. Dad, Oh, don't be so sensitive. Richard waved him off. I'm just having a bit of fun. Your mother doesn't mind, do you, Margaret? You're not one of these oversensitive people who can't take a joke, are you? All eyes were on me. 50 guests, champagne glasses still raised, waiting to see if the gardener would know her place. I've spent my entire life being underestimated. When Thomas and I started our business 35 years ago, people thought we were crazy, two immigrants with nothing but a rusty pickup truck and a dream. When Thomas died 15 years ago, everyone expected me to sell. When I expanded instead, they called it luck. When I landed my first major corporate contract, they said I must have undercut the competition. No one ever gave me credit for being smart, for being strategic, for being, quite frankly, brilliant at what I do. So I stood there in that dining room, surrounded by people who thought they were better than me, and I smiled. You're absolutely right, Richard, I said calmly. I do have a green thumb. In fact, I've been working with plants and landscapes for 35 years now. You develop a real eye for quality over that time. I paused, letting the words settle. For example, I can spot a diseased tree from 50 feet away. You've got several on your property, by the way that oak near the pond is riddled with oak wilt, and the maple by your eastern fence has anthracnose. If you don't treat them soon, you'll be looking at about $40,000 in removal costs. Richard's smile had frozen. I'm sure our landscapers would have mentioned. I'm sure they would have if they were competent. But judging by the nitrogen burn on your front lawn and the poor drainage system by your fountain, I'd say whoever you hired charged you premium prices for mediocre work. I took a sip of water. Then again, when you have more money than sense, I suppose it doesn't matter. The room had gone very quiet. Furthermore, I continued, since we're discussing landscaping, I should mention that I noticed your hedges do indeed need work. The boxwoods are improperly pruned. Whoever did them clearly doesn't understand the proper technique for maintaining formal hedges. It's a common mistake among inexperienced landscapers. Catherine had stopped laughing. I don't see how. Of course you don't, I said pleasantly, because you've never had to develop an eye for these things. You just write checks and assume you're getting quality. But here's something interesting about the landscaping industry. The best designers, the ones who work on estates like this, on university campuses, on corporate headquarters, they charge about $300 an hour for consultations alone. I set down my water glass and looked directly at Richard. Which is why I'm selective about my clients. I only work with people who appreciate quality and treat others with respect. So thank you for the offer, Richard, but I'm afraid I'll have to decline. You see, I don't work with people who confuse wealth with character. Richard's face had gone from pink to red to an alarming shade of purple. Now see here. Mom, David was at my side, his hand on my elbow. Let's go. I think that's a good idea, I said. I looked at Sophie, who still sat frozen. Sophie, it was lovely to see you again. I hope you find what you're looking for. David and I walked out together, my heels clicking against the marble floor, 50 pairs of eyes burning into my back. No one tried to stop us. No one said a word. Outside, David's hands were shaking as he called for a car. Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea he would. Sweetheart, this isn't your fault. It is, though. I saw the signs. She's been distant about meeting you, about integrating our families. I made excuses for her because I wanted to believe. He trailed off, his jaw tight. Believe what? That she was different from them. That she chose me because of who I am, not despite where I come from. The car arrived, and we got in. As we pulled away from the Bennett estate, I saw curtains twitch in the windows, the guests, no doubt, already gossiping about the evening's entertainment. David, I said carefully, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Has Sophie ever made you feel ashamed of me? He was quiet for a long moment. Not ashamed, just aware. She's made comments, little things, like suggesting we have dinner at my place instead of yours because her friends might be more comfortable in a modern space, or mentioning that her parents prefer a certain type of person at family events. I told myself it didn't matter because she loved me. But did she respect you? He didn't answer, and that was answer enough. We rode in silence back to my hotel. When we arrived, David walked me to the lobby. I need to think about some things, he said quietly. About what I want in a partner. About what kind of family I want to build. I hugged him tight. Whatever you decide, I'm proud of you. You've always had a good heart, David. Don't let anyone make you ashamed of where you came from or who raised you. After he left, I went up to my room, took off the navy dress, and sat on the bed in my bathrobe. My phone buzzed a text from David. I love you, Mom. I'm sorry for everything. I texted back, nothing to be sorry for. Get some rest. But I didn't rest. I lay awake thinking about Thomas, about the life we'd built, about the lessons we'd tried to teach our son. Respect, dignity, the value of honest work. I thought about Richard Bennett's mocking laughter, Catherine's casual cruelty, and Sophie's silence, that damning silence that spoke louder than any words. The next morning, Sunday, I took the train back to Toronto. My phone rang around noon, David's number. Mom? Are you sitting down? I'm on a train, so technically yes. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Well, it's complicated. Sophie and I talked last night, for hours. She wanted to apologize for her parents, but I told her it wasn't just about last night. It was about every time she's made excuses to keep our lives separate, every time she's acted like introducing me to her world was doing me a favor. What did she say? She cried. A lot. She said she was raised to value certain things, to see the world in a certain way, and she didn't realize how much she'd internalized it until she saw her father humiliate you. She said she was ashamed of herself. And I told her I can't marry someone who's ashamed of my mother. That if she can't stand up to her family, if she can't look them in the eye and tell them they were wrong, then we don't have a future together. My heart ached for him. Oh, David. I gave her back the ring, Mom. It's over. I closed my eyes, feeling a complex mixture of relief and sorrow. How are you doing? Honestly, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in months, maybe years. I didn't realize how much energy I was spending trying to fit into her world, trying to sand down all the rough edges of who I am to make myself acceptable. We talked for the rest of my train ride, and with each mile, I could hear him sounding more like himself, lighter, freer. But the story doesn't end there. 3 weeks later, I was in my office, and yes, I do have an office, a corner suite in a modest building in Toronto's East End when my assistant buzzed me. Maggie? There's a Richard Bennett on line 2. Says it's urgent regarding a commercial landscaping project? I stared at my phone for a moment, then smiled. Put him through. Mrs. Chen? This is Richard Bennett. We met at my daughter's engagement party a few weeks ago. I remember, Richard. What can I do for you? Well, I'm calling in my capacity as senior partner at Bennett and Associates. We're renovating our office complex new building, very prestigious location, and we're soliciting bids for the landscaping contract. Someone recommended your company, Chen and Associates Landscaping Design, as one of the premier firms in North America for corporate projects. I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at the Toronto skyline. Did they, now? Yes, and I wanted to reach out personally to discuss the project. It's quite substantial, approximately $1.2 million in total value. I understand your firm specializes in exactly this type of work? We do. We've designed landscapes for 3 university campuses, 12 corporate headquarters, and numerous private estates across Canada and the northeastern United States. Our annual revenue is approximately $3.4 million, with a client retention rate of 98%. Silence on the other end of the line. Richard, are you still there? You own Chen and Associates? I founded it, actually. 35 years ago, with my late husband Thomas. We started with a pickup truck and a lawnmower, built it into one of the most respected landscape design firms in the region. Surely whoever recommended us mentioned that? More silence. The thing is, Richard, we're very selective about our clients. We only work with people who value quality, who respect our expertise, and who treat our team with dignity. We've found that clients who meet those criteria are much easier to work with long-term. Mrs. Chen, about the other night. Let me stop you there. I'm going to be very clear about something. Your project, while substantial, represents about 35% of our current annual revenue. We could accommodate it, but we'd have to decline other opportunities. And quite frankly, I don't believe your firm would be a good cultural fit for our company. Now wait just a minute. I'm not finished. You asked me at your party if I could take a joke. The answer is yes, I have an excellent sense of humor, but there's a difference between a joke and cruelty disguised as humor. What you did that night wasn't funny. It was an attempt to diminish me in front of your peers, to remind me and everyone else that you considered me beneath you. I think you're overreacting. Am I? Tell me, Richard, when was the last time you mocked a CEO at a dinner party? When did you last suggest that a corporate executive should go trim your hedges? You wouldn't dare, because you respect power and money. You only disrespect people you think can't fight back. His breathing was heavy on the other end of the line. This is very unprofessional. No, Richard. Unprofessional was your behavior at that party. This is simply a business decision. We're declining your project. I'm sure you'll find another firm willing to work with you, though I suspect they won't do as thorough a job as we would have. But that's the price of poor character. Sometimes it costs you quality. My daughter Sophie, she wants to apologize. She's been trying to reach David. That's between Sophie and David. This conversation is between you and me, and it's over. Have a good day, Richard. I hung up before he could respond. My assistant poked her head in. Everything okay? Everything's perfect, Jennifer. Actually, can you pull up the Morrison University project? I think we should allocate those resources we were holding for Bennett. With pleasure, she said, grinning. That evening, David called. Mom, I heard about the phone call with Richard Bennett. How did you... Sophie called me. Apparently her father came home furious, ranting about how you humiliated him, how you rejected $1 million contract out of spite. It was $2 million, and it wasn't spite. It was standards. David laughed, really laughed, the sound filling my kitchen through the phone. Sophie said something interesting. She said watching her father get rejected, watching him realize that you were successful and powerful and completely uninterested in his approval. It was the first time she'd ever seen him at a loss. Good. She wants to talk to me. She says the broken engagement made her take a hard look at her life, at her values. She's thinking about leaving her father's firm, starting over somewhere else. What do you think about that? I think people can change, but they have to want to, and they have to prove it through actions, not just words. She hurt you, Mom. She hurt me. And I can't just forget that because she's sorry. "That's very wise, sweetheart. I learned from the best." We talked for a while longer, and after we hung up, I sat in my quiet house, the same house Thomas and I bought 40 years ago, the house where we raised David, where we celebrated victories and weathered losses. It wasn't a mansion. It didn't have a fountain or a pond, but it was built on something stronger than money: love, respect, and the dignity of honest work. About 6 months later, I got a letter. It was from Sophie, handwritten on simple stationery, not the embossed Bennett family letterhead. "Dear Mrs. Chen," it began, "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I'm trying to become a better person. I left my father's firm and took a job at a nonprofit legal clinic. The pay is a fraction of what I made before, but the work is meaningful. More importantly, I'm learning what it means to serve people rather than judge them. I think about that night often, about my silence when my father mocked you, about all the times I made David feel like he needed to hide where he came from. I was raised to believe that certain types of work, certain types of people, were beneath me. I was wrong, and I'm deeply sorry. I'm not asking David to take me back. I understand that trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to rebuild. But I wanted you to know that watching you stand up that night, watching you maintain your dignity while my father lost all of his, that changed something in me. You showed me what real strength looks like. I hope someday I can make you proud, even if I'm no longer part of your son's life. Thank you for raising him to be the kind of man who knows his worth. With deep respect and regret, Sophie Bennett." I read the letter 3 times, then carefully folded it and put it in my desk drawer. I didn't respond. Some lessons need to be learned in silence. David started dating someone new about 8 months after the broken engagement, a teacher named Hannah who worked at an inner-city school. When he brought her to Sunday dinner, she showed up in jeans and a sweater, complimented my pot roast, and spent 20 minutes asking me about my business with genuine curiosity. She didn't care that my house was modest or that I worked with my hands. She cared that David was happy, that he came from good people who'd taught him good values. That's when I knew he'd be okay. As for Richard and Catherine Bennett, I heard through the grapevine that their law firm hit some difficulties, a malpractice suit, several major clients leaving, something about ethical violations. Their social standing took a hit. The mansion in Connecticut went on the market last I heard. I didn't take any pleasure in their downfall. Schadenfreude has never been my style. But I did think about that night, about Richard's mocking laughter and Catherine's casual cruelty, and I thought about how they'd tried to make me feel small. Here's what they didn't understand. You can't make someone feel inferior without their consent. They could mock my work, my background, my lack of country club membership, but they couldn't touch my sense of self-worth. That was built over decades of hard work, of building something from nothing, of raising a good man despite being widowed young. I think about Thomas sometimes, especially on Sunday mornings when I'm drinking my coffee and reading the paper. I think about how proud he'd be of David, of the business we built, of the fact that I never backed down when people tried to diminish me. He used to say, "Maggie, let your work speak for itself. The people worth impressing don't need to be told, and the people who need to be told aren't worth impressing." He was right, of course. He usually was. I'm 62 now, and I've been thinking about retirement. Not because I'm tired, I still love what I do, but because I've proved everything I needed to prove. I came to this country with nothing. I built a successful business. I raised a son who knows the difference between price and value, between wealth and worth. The landscaping industry has taught me many valuable lessons over the years, but perhaps the most important is this: you reap what you sow. Richard Bennett sowed cruelty and reaped humiliation. Sophie sowed indifference and reaped loss. I sowed hard work, dignity, and respect, and I've reaped a life I'm proud of. There's a saying in gardening: the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is today. It's never too late to start building something good, to choose kindness over cruelty, to stand up for what's right. David and Hannah got engaged last month. When he told me, he said, "Mom, Hannah wants to have the wedding at your place in the backyard. She says there's no place more beautiful than a garden planted with love." I cried when he said that. Not sad tears, but the kind of tears that come when you realize that everything you've worked for, everything you've tried to teach, has taken root and grown into something beautiful. The wedding is next spring. We're going to have it under the maple trees I planted 30 years ago, the ones Thomas and I chose together from a nursery in Hamilton. The hedges I've tended for decades will be in full bloom. The flower beds I've designed and redesigned over the years will be bursting with color. And yes, I'll be hiring a professional catering company, because while I can landscape a 5-acre estate, I draw the line at cooking for 75 wedding guests. Some things, after all, are best left to the experts. But unlike Richard Bennett, I know the difference between expertise and servitude, between hiring help and looking down on those who serve. Every person who works on David's wedding will be treated with respect and paid fairly. They'll eat the same food as the guests. They'll be thanked publicly for their contribution. Because that's what you do when you understand that every honest job has dignity, that every person deserves respect, and that true class has nothing to do with money and everything to do with character. I never saw Richard Bennett again after that phone call, but I heard he attended a landscaping industry conference last year, probably trying to network for his firm. Someone told me he saw my name on the speaker list for a panel on sustainable corporate landscape design and quickly found another session to attend. I smiled when I heard that, not because I'm petty, but because it confirmed what I'd always known. Bullies are, at their core, cowards. They only pick on people they think can't fight back. The moment you show them you're not afraid, the moment you demonstrate that you're every bit as capable and accomplished as they are, they scatter like leaves in the wind. To anyone reading this who's ever been made to feel small, who's ever been mocked for their honest work, who's ever been told they don't belong in certain spaces because of what they do or where they come from, I want you to know this. Your worth is not determined by other people's narrow view of the world. I spent 35 years building a business with my hands. Those same hands planted gardens that have brought beauty to thousands of people. They held my son when he cried, applauded his achievements, and taught him how to work hard and stay humble. Those hands, the ones Richard Bennett mocked, built something he could never buy, a legacy of dignity, respect, and honest work. And that, ultimately, is worth more than all the mansions in Connecticut combined.